I want to record some kind of video. This was going to be a podcast topic, but we never got around to it. I should probably save it and do it as a supplemental with Joe. But I kind of want to talk about the expectations of firmware for hardware. And in some ways it folds over into software version updates for in-the-box synthesizers software. But specifically for synth hardware, there has been a trend in the last 10 years to place expectations on the next firmware update for a particular piece of software. And I think the industry did it to itself in that a combination of shipping product with known issues, right? Or the concept, I think it came from gaming. I think maybe the gaming industry set up this expectations with the whole 0-day patch thing. You know, there's a bunch of hype for a game, even before there was the concept of like early access that Steam has propagated in other platforms. But the idea that when a product releases, it will, on day zero, on the day of its release, have a day zero patch. And it's the fixes for the, oh my God, oh shit, we missed this kind of stuff. Or there is, a particular kind of user or a particular, configuration that someone's using it in presents some problem that's a game day, breaker, a showstopper. And then, that just became the norm. And I think this is kind of true. It set expectations, basically, that, hey, anything new from a software perspective that comes out on day one or day zero, there's a patch for the showstoppers, for the, oh shit, we missed this. And, that's a good pattern. From a business perspective, that's a great pattern, right? I'm ruminating on, like, people hate that, but it's the norm. Well, why do they do that? Can they get rid of that? I'm not a business owner, but I've been in the software industry for I've been in the software industry long enough, right? Everybody, there's always statements by people on the internet, very heavy finger quotes there, for like, I'm a developer who, figures all this, been in the industry for X. I know how it works. Here's my opinion. It's kind of irrelevant. I'm a person. I'm a software user. This is my experience. Day zero patches are really good for business, typically. It allows you to get your product to market faster than your competitors, right? It's a form of technical debt where you cut some corners in order to get to market faster, and then you fix them later. This is true. I think this is carried over into hardware, right? Especially hardware that's heavily software-based. So digital synths with some, it's irrelevant whether it's digital or analog. Take a Moog, right? The panel code for the majority of larger Moogs, certainly the polyphonic Moogs, or the Muse is an example. It's the control surface, the control plane is like software based, right? And so features like the arpeggiator, it's all software. And so we've come to sort of expect, it's the norm, that the day zero release of a piece of hardware, a piece of gear, is going to have a day zero patch. And then it's going to continue to have firmware patches over time. And patches were initially, primarily, as a mechanism for fixing problems. And then also, they're also a feature, an ability for evolving the product, right? We can do that in a 1.1, 1.2. We'll add features later. And I think people, well, I try to be, again, I'm not going to prescribe how you should feel. That doesn't work, right? That's silly. This is how I feel about it. And I think my attitude, for the most part, is one that keeps me happy. So if you're really angry at software and hardware, software synth vendors and hardware synth vendors on their sort of patching and revision behavior, think about it this way. See if it makes you happier. Certainly in the domain of hardware, the product is what is shipped, right? If there's a company who continuously and repeatedly ships hardware with significant problems, showstopper bugs, promises of functionality that aren't present, said it was going to do this, doesn't do that. It's on you to decide whether or not you want to give them your money. If you have no experience with a particular vendor, then it's an adventure, to put a good spin on it, right? It's a risk. You're like, I've never bought a synth from this company. Let's give it a try. But there's this expectation now that companies are shipping a product and then going, here's my synth. It's just a guess on feature set. We think it's pretty good. We did some market research, or we based it on some other synth, some bit of nostalgia, or we based on a competitor that we think we can do it better, faster, cheaper. And then they wait. The sort of normalized expectation for a lot of this synth using community is that, oh great, now we'll tell you what we want in the next firmware update. And I think that is valid. It's valid to think that, because that does happen. There are companies that seem to be soliciting quite clearly from their user base, hey, right, this used to be done in beta programs, right? User acceptance testing is where we say, all right, this was the goal. The synth was going to do XYZ. We think it does XYZ in the context of the way we expect it to be used. Let's go share this with people and get some users to try it and do some tests to say, is it doing what you expected it to do? Is it doing what you expected it to do based on our, what we told you, or the hype, or the spec sheet, right? There's a spectrum of formality and rigor for how that can be done. And it's been getting a little less formal and a little less rigorous, kind of casual. And some companies are eliciting that. They're like saying, let's keep it on the down low. Let's just, keep it casual. And maybe they offer a piece of hardware to some people early to say, it feels like a beta program. It's like, here, you could test this out. But then there are companies that apparently just ship the product. And some might say they ship the product half-baked. And then, it's like, or broken, dead on arrival. It's like, here's this thing. Oh, by the way, it's missing a huge chunk of functionality we promised, but we'll get that in the next firmware update. So whether you like that business practice or not, it appears to happen. Certainly people complain and claim that that's what's happening. And there's a lot of grumpiness. Now, it's the internet. So 9 out of 10 messages on the internet are people complaining about something. And the 1 in 10 is people going, this is a great thing. I have no problems with it. Because people who have no problems with a product on the internet typically don't bother. They're busy doing whatever task they needed that product for, making music, bleeps and bloops. So this is like, hey, Captain Obvious, duh, that's the internet. Oh, fine. But I guess the reason for I'm just doing this rumination is I just want to think about and share my thoughts on expectations, and in some ways, The gall is too strong a word. I am personally mildly triggered when I see people say, this is a almost good product. It's so close to being great, but it's missing these features, and I want them in the next firmware update. You should do this. Now, there's a spectrum of attitude and expression that message can lie on, right? It can lie on the, respectful. It's like, respectfully, this would be a great feature ad if you could manage it, right? And or it could be less respectfully, like, this product is so good except for this stupid decision on the feature set. Why did they do this? I can't believe they did this. No one should buy this until they fix it. And both of those messages, I think, are valid. I can understand the anger that can, when expectations, especially if something is, a particular feature is hyped and then it doesn't materialize. But I don't know. I think people should just, again, I shouldn't prescribe. I should say what people should do. I attempt, let's keep it personal, I try to let go and say, come in with the attitude that says, let's explore this product and see what it actually can do. I don't get, patently more philosophical, but if you want to call it stoic sort of attitude, you could say, hey, I want this product. Let's see what it actually does. What's the reality of it? And let's see if I can make that work in my system, or if I need to, can I change my system of how I use this, make this music, so that this tool is useful, that the synthesizer is useful, and then it is what it is. And don't cry out for firmware updates for features. A bug fix, you should obviously ask for help, right, if something doesn't work. But there are ways to ask, right? Again, a spectrum. You could get on YouTube and crap all over a product and a company, or you could contact their support or their user base or their forum or their Discord server and try and start a dialogue. Screaming on YouTube typically is not a dialogue. And so I try not to do that. Although here I am posting this, so what is this? I don't know. This may be just like mental masturbation. Feels good to share a thought, regardless of whether someone is actually paying attention or not. It's kind of like shouting into the void, but the act of explaining something to someone, even if that someone is virtual, usually helps to clarify things in my mind. So here we are. But going back, I attempt to treat products sort of stoically and say, what it does is what it does. As long as there's no egregious gaps based on expectations of marketing, like we said it would do XYZ, the product shipped, it only does XY. That's a gap. That's a pretty painful gap. That's a mistake. And that will inform my perception of the company for future purchases, right? But if it's simply, we said it would do XYZ, it does XYZ, and it's like, okay, well, why doesn't it do, Z prime? I want a variant of Z that would be more useful for me. You can express that in a constructive way, or you can express that in a destructive way. I try and express it in a constructive way. If you go look at, I've got an old Nord video where I talk about things I love and hate about Nord synths. That's attempts to be a constructive video, as an example. I'll put a link in the corner. So, I don't know. The culture of demanding features via firmware loudly and publicly, I think is kind of silly. And I would encourage people not to do it, or at least find a more constructive way of expressing that, so that there is a business benefit to the company that makes the synthesizer for listening to you earnestly, as opposed to doing marketing spin control when there's a backlash on the lack of feature Z prime or whatever. So, coming to the end of my constitutional, we'll see if this recording was recorded in a clean way, and I may publish this to the tube, but there's a little constitutional philosophy, and we'll see what happens. Well, talk to you later.